I read a lot of books. Not only do I read a lot of books, I read historic books, including those books from hundreds of years ago. I have advertising, marketing, psychology, and other books that have been published 100 years ago, 150 years ago. I've read most all religious texts and many popular texts over the years. And what I've discovered is there's nothing new under the sun. Hey, I'm Justin Hitt with Inside Strategic Relations. We're going to talk a little bit about critical thinking. I've got a little card here, and we're going to talk about how you see the world. Every input you have throughout life, every experience, every piece of knowledge you pick up, every person you interact with, every book that you read. Charlie Tremendous Jones said that you're a sum of the people you meet and the books you read. All that influences who you are and what you do. And in reading these old books and reading newsletters and reading from thinkers, I'm not going to say thought leaders because many of these people are just rehashing ancient stuff that's been around forever. But what I discovered is 4 things, and I'm going to share them with you here today. And these 4 things will transform how you see the world and, in fact, reduce anxiety and reduce frustration so that you can actually get more from day-to-day activities, more from the world around you. First off, there's nothing new in this world. There are no new ideas, there are no new problems, and there are no new solutions. Now, the implementation of the solution might look a little different. That's part of number 2, is that you can put old wine in new bottles. But essentially, humans have always faced economic challenges, natural disasters. They've always faced viruses. Like right now, the coronavirus is something people are talking about. Well, there was the Spanish flu, and then there was the bubonic plague. Everybody always over-exaggerates the truth as a means to expedite the communications. However, they don't take the practical measures because the problem sounds too big. That's an ongoing thing. So what tends to happen in life is very small activities tend to build up to big results rather than big giant activities creating big results. Usually if you do something huge, you're going to get a tiny improvement, where if you do many tiny improvements, you'll get some huge result. It's just a weird thing about the way humans and the world works. Just as water can erode it and create something like the Grand Canyon. So number 2 is there's, if I put this card up here, what is old can be made new. That's both a warning and something to be very excited about. I have some manufacturing books from the 1970s, and I actually used the methodologies in those manufacturing books applied directly to marketing, applied directly to operational risk. In the 1970s, they didn't have a bunch of computers. They couldn't run a data model, but they had good ways of looking at things. They had optimized solutions. The reason the solution was optimized is because the computing power was so low that they had to go through a short path or a good model rather than the perfect exact model. And what I find is these models can be extracted from historical context, tested in a manual way, and then automated. So one example would be, if you have a large amount of policy, you could actually do a content analysis on the policy to find out key terms, key concepts, key phrases, sentiment, for example. If the government has a set of laws on the books, you can look through the laws and look at the sentiment of the laws. Now, you can do that with text analytics using machine learning tools, but you can also just read it and then code the words used. And you could do it by hand if you had to. And that same skill works if you're reading a document or a proposal or you're writing a sales letter. There's nothing new about it. The difference is the tools. So you've got this old concept that worked well in ancient times. King Solomon, the story of King Solomon, he had a tiered leadership structure to build a temple. He had a central planning for that project that laid out the work for each day. He didn't go in and tell the workers what they had to do for 7 months. He said, this is what we're going to do today, and the workers did that today. That's probably the basis of every manufacturing model there is. And just because you're doing it on computers doesn't make it any different. You need to have somebody in charge setting the success criteria. It could be your customer, it could be a leader, or you need somebody doing work. That's the way it goes. An old concept made new by describing it as like leadership circles or describing it as total quality management. See, it's the concept that we have a job to do, and now you're going to layer things on top of it. So Scrum, for example, isn't a new concept. It's basically ganging work together into phases that are basically, you concentrate all your resources on getting this phase done, and then at the end of the phase you start doing a little bit more. They're called sprints for a reason, because everybody runs to the next goal and they stop, and then they look around to see what happened, what worked, what didn't work, then they set up the next one and they run to the next one. There's nothing new under the sun. We need these changes as humans, but very often you can introduce that change by taking something that's old that worked well and bringing it forward into the modern context and introducing it as a new idea. I very often, in reading these old books, recognize concepts and theories that are introduced today as something completely unique and new. Content marketing, for example, the exercise of writing materials that position your business or attract people to express interest in your business has been around since the first classified ads. In fact, Google AdWords is like a classified ads platform. It's a small, tiny ad that you put in front of prospects, and they raise their hand to tell you that they're interested in something. You can make it new. So if you've got an old concept that you know works, you've got something that's relevant in your industry, you can actually recycle it into something new. We even talk about that when we talk about recycling your marketing. Number 3, it's not what you know, it's what you do. I know a lot of stuff, but there's no practical way for me to do all that I know. In fact, I collect books. You can see Harvey Brody's book in the Nike box up there, and some GKIC and Dan Kennedy's materials right behind me. Over here, there's a bookshelf full of books about marketing. In another room, I have a stack of books that are about permaculture and organic gardening, and I've got books from the 1970s and the 1960s and the 1950s and the 1940s. And guess what? If you go back far enough, it's all organic gardening, because there are no chemical fertilizers if you go back more than a couple hundred years, because essentially, besides poop, they were fermenting manures and using that as a fertilizer. But essentially, before World War II, there really weren't chemical fertilizers to apply to things. And so if you want to go back to organic gardening, you can go look at historical models. Now, you have to understand that there were different seeds back then and different cultivars of plants, but I've got a pile of books, and those books are those topics, and I can focus in on it. And but knowing the content of those books, if I could download those books into my brain and instantly know everything about what's in those books, it has zero value. In fact, we essentially have that today with the internet, where we can look up anything. If you want to know how far a monkey can throw feces, you can look it up on the internet, and there's somebody talking about it. There's a video that shows you. You could watch 5 videos of monkeys throwing feces and estimate the distance in which they can throw it by category of monkey, and it would not have any relevant value other than a ridiculous example in a video, so that you might get the concept that it's not what you know, it's what you do with it. Now, that's one of the reasons why I'm doing these videos, is because I know a lot of shit. And I know it because of my 20-some years of experience, and it's written down in here, and I've used it with clients, and it's worked great for clients. But it doesn't matter how much of it I know if people aren't able to use it. And in fact, I'm going to give you good stuff, because most people don't do anything. And so your ability to do is, you could do more with what you know today than you could ever imagine. And in fact, number 4 is outcomes matter more than objectives. You took the time to watch this video so you might learn something new to improve yourself or move forward. And I'm telling you that you already know what you need to know, but the objective to learn is not going to move you forward. You simply need to shift that objective into an outcome. What is it that you want to achieve? I want to produce a video to capture something that was on a piece of paper into a more viable or usable context. Once it's captured in the video, I can have my assistant send it off for transcription. I can turn it into a podcast. I can turn it into a bunch of things while I'm off doing something else. And so the outcome is a portable medium of the knowledge I've gained through experience in a contextual way that others might understand. What is it for you? If you're an electrician, your objective might be to grow a electrical business and get it past $1 million, get it up to $10 million. But what is the outcome that you need to achieve this week? Do you need 5 new sales? Do you need 12 new prospects in your funnel? Do you need a new offer or opportunity to get in front of people? See, you can sell index cards. You can sell millions of index cards. Or you can sell the paper the index cards were printed on. Or you can sell the trees that they made the paper with. See, there's always a place for what you know and where you are in that supply chain. You don't need new information. You need to simply move forward with those outcomes. And what is the outcome today? What is the one thing that you're going to do today with the information you already have and the knowledge you already have and to move you forward? In fact, is there an idea you can recycle? Is there something that you've done in the past that worked well that you can do again? And see, it really comes down to the test. You set a goal, you set an objective, and then you test, does this move me closer to that objective? I'm doing a project for one of my groups of clients. I get together these groups of clients and we do these projects just for that group. And that's another way that I'm compiling these materials and putting it into practical outcomes. And we're actually going through 2 popular personal finance tools as part of a demonstration of how easy it can be to do cash flow management and to do simple goals around retirement, debt reduction, or debt management more, because we don't really care if we get rid of all the debt. We essentially want to make sure, and this is an old concept that's very relevant today. It doesn't matter how much debt you have. It doesn't matter how much you owe people if you've got the cash flow to cover the debt. We see that in corporations. As long as they've got the cash flow to cover the debt and the cost of debt is lower than their utilization of capital, their ability to earn, then they can do that all the time. Now, would they be more efficient if they had no debt? Yes, that's true. But they may not have the leverage necessary to reach the markets to get to that tipping point. Well, in your own, as a high-income professional entrepreneur, same concept works true. You can have a mortgage on your home, assuming the mortgage is a low enough interest rate, and having the home gives you access to an income high enough to cover the mortgage. So maybe you had to move to a city to work, and your mortgage is $700 a month, and if you lived out in the country, it'd be $300 a month, but it would be a 2.5-hour drive to work every day living in the country versus living in the city. You're essentially paying the same amount for both, but you got to know the difference. So that's a outcome. And you got to be careful about your outcomes, because some outcomes, like being debt free, is a delusion in the sense of your utilization or opportunity. The outcome of a more just and civil country. Well, you don't get there without discourse, and you may not even want to get there because very often the justice and the civility of a world, it has to be imposed on people because people tend to argue with each other. That's one of the problems that we've had for a long time. You might not even like the things I'm saying. You might think I look weird or something, and you might argue with that concept. But that's not an outcome. That's just your objective is to be right, and you're not right. So you argue about it, or you're right in your own mind, and your objective is for other people to believe as you believe. See, that's the goal setting. We work on that with in our private coaching. The last thing, number 5, is you don't really know till you test. Testing's an interesting concept. How would you know that these 5 factors that I've discovered by reading old books and literature and really studying humans, how would you know they're even true? How would you know half of what's on the internet is actually true? I could just be making this stuff up off the top of my head. I could have wrote this card like, I'm going to try to sell a product. I'm selling coaching, so I need to give you 5 points of wisdom that are going to confuse you. See, how do you know? Well, the only way to know is to test. Uh-oh, what's going on, boys? All right, come on back here. Come on back. That's a fancy gimbal there. That's a fancy gimbal. Okay, here we go. Lock on to me, baby. Are you with me now? No, wait, where are we going? Where are we going? Oh, man. Oh, come on. Okay. See, how do you know this internet stuff is as easy as people make it look? I made a conscious decision to not clean my background up. This is where I work. This is my workplace, okay? I made a conscious decision to go ahead and test the concept of giving you like reality, okay? I have hundreds of gigs of video, audio, reports. Every client assignment that I've done, and many of them I've had non-disclosure agreements, so I cannot share them with you. I can only share my interpretation of it that's still in my head somewhere, and I can only share it as new material. But ultimately, how do you know these 5 concepts are real? Is because you can test them. So you can read an old historic book. So you're listening to a speaker, and the speaker says, hey, back in the 1800s, they actually had classified advertising and direct marketing, and in Harper's Weekly, there were ads in the back where you could send away for catalogs, and that's one of the ways that Sears became such a big company, is because they were really good at this catalog marketing. And you're thinking today, well, that's not relevant. Well, wait a second. Is it relevant is the question. That's the first test. Well, is it true? That's another test. And see, when we talk inside strategic relations, we're talking about that critical thinking process. So you can do a test now, and you can go back and get a Harper's Weekly, which is online. You can get digital scanned versions. You could go to the library. You could go somewhere and find out that during the Civil War, not only were they selling catalogs with products, they were selling information marketing courses on how you can invest in real estate. And when you find that out, it just transforms your thinking. If you're investing in real estate and you realize that they've been selling information about marketing real estate, which is the objective for them to sell information about making money in real estate, and you realize they've been doing it for hundreds of years, you might go back and ask, well, what has worked over those hundreds of years that is a common thread in the programs that have survived? Now I'm throwing some things in here. I'm throwing the timeline in here. What has lasted over time? What is a proven solution? What is something that we can apply today? These are tests, and these tests will allow you to know. If it's something old, how can we make it new? Facebook, for example. Now, a lot of you folks don't remember AOL, and you don't remember Prodigy, anything before that. I've been on the internet since 1989. I've actually been on the internet when it was a text terminal, and we had to call up to a university. We didn't actually physically. Well, actually, a friend of mine, he had to call up, dial a phone, call up, wait till he hears it, put it on a modem so that he could connect. So it wasn't like a dial-up modem, but I had a 300 baud dial-up modem. My point being is that we talk about Facebook and Instagram and all this stuff like it's magic, like Facebook's taking over. AOL was desired to be the center of content because the internet had a lot of information, but it was hard to find. Search engines really weren't a thing yet, so they curated information and brought it to one place. Now, they had to have big teams to do that, and they had to have media companies do that for you. But Facebook said, well, what's the old idea? The old idea is bringing people together to one place to experience the internet so that we can put advertising in front of them. That's the same thing a newspaper does. Well, we don't want to spend a bunch of money on content. We want to focus on the technology. See, because today you can extract a lot of data out, where a newspaper had to call people on the phone and do surveys. AOL had to sell subscriptions. Well, they flipped the script, and they basically said, well, let's give it away for free, but we're not going to create the content because that's expensive. We're going to have the users create the content. And now you basically have AOL with user-created content, which is message boards. So back in the day when we dial up to BBSs, bulletin board systems, if you know what to look for, you can find me in the 1980s on the Internet Archives in those big text things. But ultimately, the key is Facebook isn't anything new. And we know it's not going to stay forever because AOL didn't stay forever. Newspapers didn't stay forever. Message boards, community forums, all these things didn't stay forever. Now, they're still there. They don't go away. But again, is how do we layer on top of that? So Instagram, for example, layers on top of that by being a visual medium. We do have a problem with intelligence today. I was talking about this with some clients. There is a larger gap between, instead of a standard deviation, we have a lot of dumb people and then a lot of smart people in a general population. Within that, we have segments of population where there are standards deviations, and we also have segments of population where there's higher intelligence and a big gap of lower intelligence. So what that means is we have more specialization today, and we have a larger general population of consumers who are kind of waiting to be fed information. They're able to go get the unique, specific information that they need today, so they don't really have to know it. So if my kid was doing a project on the Voyager satellite, asked me a question about the time dilation between, and I'm using my terms, he didn't say time dilation, but what time is it on the Voyager satellite and what time is it on Earth, and is there a difference? Well, I know there is a difference, but I don't know how many seconds it is or how many minutes it is, but I could go to NASA's website and get the information. So I don't have to have a high level of general intelligence when it comes to knowing about the Voyager satellite or the interests of my kid, but I have to know how to find the information. So what we've got here now is the test. How do I know the information is accurate? Where do I go to look for the information? But again, there's nothing new. It's like, you could go to 100 years ago, you just go to the library. 50 years ago, you go to a library. 200 years ago, you'd go to your local sage or your local university system or your professor. Now, the quality of this stuff changes over time. A university 100 years ago isn't teaching the same topics they teach today, and it may have different levels of quality by the different courses. I do want to express this because I do say it a lot about the general population. There are studies that show that general intelligence has reduced since the Victorian age. So as we started to get more external sources of information, our general intelligence as a population, not as individuals, as a population has actually gone down. And so we may be in a state, we already know we're in a state where you can survive with you could survive in society without actually being intelligent, where in the past you would get sucked into a machine, or you'd have a farming accident. But again, there's these 5 things that thread throughout history that categorize the concepts that we've seen. And in your industry, you can drill down and find out what they were doing 100 years ago and borrow those things that are relevant today. Let me cover the 5 before we wrap up. There's nothing new in this world. The ideas, the problems, the solutions have been going on forever. There's 1,000 different religions. It is a little hyperbole to say I've read all the religious texts. I've read the major religious texts, but most of those religions are pretty much the same. Be nice to the people around you. Be obedient to your superiors. Be obedient to your God. A lot of political organizations use religion to layer in that obedience to your superiors. That's a whole nother program. What's old can be new again. What AOL is now Facebook. Same concept. Single place for you to go on the internet. Google is a AOL, except a different context, because the user pays for all of the content hosting. Where on Facebook, they pay for content hosting. You just provide the content. Number 3 is it's not what you know, it's what you do with it. So just knowing this stuff isn't doing anything for your bottom line, isn't doing anything for your long-term goals and objectives. It isn't building your retirement account. So how do you make it do that? There's a number of ways that we're not going to talk about today. Number 4 is outcomes matter more than objectives. You can have a desire to do something, but until you do it, you really don't know anything. I have a permaculture design certification, and I watched a bunch of permaculture videos. I also attended classes. This is a problem we have today, is you can have a lot of videos, and they all say nothing. You go to a class, you go to a teacher, and you mind blown. You learn something new, but not until you actually do it do you realize that they can't explain every context, every detail. I have a horrible deer problem here. I can grow like magic in some places, but here, deer eat the hell out of everything. So I need fencing systems in place to keep the deer out. And I haven't built the fences yet. We use other methods to deter deer. But literally, I've got videos of 9 to 10 deer in a herd in my backyard. And so not until you apply it, not until you start moving towards those outcomes, do you start realizing the nuances that make the difference between knowing something and doing something. And number 5 is you don't really know until you test. And again, that's the whole thread that keeps these things together, these 5 things together. I hope you use this to advance yourself and to improve your situation in life. If you have any challenges or frustrations with this, or you have questions about anything I cover, you can visit me at www.askjustinhit.com. Just open a ticket and ask your questions. There's no fancy forms there. There's nothing. Just go there, ask your questions, and we're going to start publishing more content in this particular From My Desk series so that you can kind of see, there's a lot to move with. Now, I want you to move. I don't want you to sit here and watch 5 more videos. Take the 5 points that I've given you, move forward in the outcomes that you desire, and I'm looking forward to hearing about your success. Again, I'm Justin Hitt with Inside Strategic Relations. It's one of my newsletters, but you can visit at www.askjustinhit.com to ask your questions. Thanks for watching.